afternoon, everyone. We are the Group 4 and I'm Alexandra Barsaga. So, ang topic na i-report namin today ay ang The Cry of PugadLawin, Balintawak, or Bahay, Toro. So, bibigyan ko kayo ng konting idea about dun sa report namin. And alam ko naman na very familiar kayo dito kasi ito yung sa history natin, ito yung very significant na tumatak talaga sa isip at sa history, tumatak siya. So, yung Cry of PugadLawin or Balintawak or Bahay Toro, ayun yung naging simula ng himagsikang Pilipino laban sa Imperyong Kastila upang makamit natin yung kalayaan na matagal na talagang gustong matamasa ng mga Pilipino noong panahon ng Kastila. And ito yung ating description of the lesson. Description of the lesson. This course analyzes Philippine history from multiple perspectives through the lens of selected primary sources coming from the various disciplines and different genres. Students are given opportunities to analyze author's background and main arguments, compare other points of view, identify biases, and examine the evidence presented in the document. And ito yung ating intended learning outcomes. The student should be able to meet the following intended learning outcomes: to understand and the controversies and conflicting views in Philippine history, identify the people involved in Cry of PugadLawin, and appreciate the historical importance of the Cry of PugadLawin. And at the end of the lesson, we students should be able to analyze and identify the people involved in Cry of PugadLawin, determine the location of Cry of PugadLawin, Balintawak or Bahay Toro, and develop critical and analytical skills with the controversies of Cry of PugadLawin. So, bakit nga ba cry? So, hindi naman literal na cry or sigaw or iyak yung tinutukoy dito sa Cry of PugadLawin, Balintawak, or Bahay Toro. Yung term daw na cry is tumutukoy sa first clash o yung violent confrontation between the Katipuneros and Guardia Civil. Tumutukoy din ito sa pagpunit ng sedula bilang pagsuway sa katapatan nila sa Spain. So, alam naman natin na yung sedula noon is yung pinakamahalagang document ng isang Pilipino na palaging hinahanap sa kanila ng mga Espanyol. And lastly, tumutukoy din ito sa sinulat ni Bonifacio na Viva la Independencia Filipina o Long Live Philippine Independence na sinulat niya sa wall to express their secret society. So, para sa akin, habang inaaral ko to, yung secret society na tinutukoy ni Andres Bonifacio is yung kanilang revolutionary society, which is kataas-taasan, kagalang-galang, katipunan ng mga anak ng bayan or simply called katipunan. In the earlier days, the revolution was named as Cry of Balintawak. However, due to Agoncillo's book, The Revolt of the Masses, it has been changed to Cry of PugadLawin, even though, according to many critics, the source is not reliable due to Valenzuela's inconsistent statement. So, yung Cry of PugadLawin, Cry of Balintawak daw, ay nabago dahil sa libro ni Agoncillo, which is yung Revolt of the Masses. So, yung purpose ng book, ayon sa aking research, is to force rich Filipino to join the Katipunan or at least help the Katipuneros financially. And sabi din na si Toro Agoncillo ay ama ng maraming historiador. And isinulat niya nga yung Revolt of the Masses nung siya 35 years old. So, later naman, malalaman talaga natin kung ano ba talaga, Balintawak or PugadLawin yung tama.
Why is it Balintawak? The Cry of Rebellion in the Philippines happened in August 1896. There are a lot of controversies puzzling the minds of the readers regarding the real place and date of this event. Some accounts pointing directly to Balintawak are associated with the cry. Lieutenant Olegario Diaz of the Spanish Civil Guards wrote in 1896 that the event happened in Balintawak, which corroborates the account of the historian Gregorio Saide and Teodoro Calao. Ang sigaw ng paghihimagsik sa Pilipinas ay nangyari noong August 1896, pero maraming nalilito kung kailan at saan ba talaga nangyari yon. May nagsasabi na sa Balintawak kasi naugnay daw sa Takray. Pero isinulat niya ni Lieutenant Olegario Diaz, isang Spanish Civil Guards noong 1896, na sa Balintawak yun nangyari, na nagpapatunay na tama sila Gregorio Saide at Teodoro Calao.
Some reasons why PugadLawin is not considered as the place of the cry. People of Balintawak initiated the revolution against the Spaniards. That is why it is not appreciated to call it cry of PugadLawin. The place PugadLawin only existed in 1935 after the rebellion happened in 1896. Lastly, the term PugadLawin was only made up because of the hawk nest at the top of the tall tree at the backyard of Tandang Sora in Banlat, Gulod, Caloocan, where it is said to be one of the hiding places of the revolutionary group led by Andres Bonifacio. This controversy remains unresolved. There were 5 dates for the cry: August 20, 23, 24, 25, and 26. 5 different venues for the first cry: Balintawak, PugadLawin, Kangkong, Bahay, Toro, and Pasong Tamo. So, when and where did it actually happen? The occurred towards the end of August 1896, and that all the places mentioned are in Caloocan, which in those times was a district of Balintawak.
Different dates and places. Pio Valenzuela, a close associate of Andres Bonifacio, declared in 1948 that it happened in PugadLawin on August 23, 1896. Santiago Alvarez, a Katipunero and son of Mariano Alvarez, the leader of the Magdiwang faction bin Cavite, stated in 1972 that the cry took place in Bahay, Toro, now in Quezon City, on August 24, 1896. Historian Gregorio Saide stated in the books in 1954 that the cry happened in Balintawak on August 26, 1896. Officer of the Spanish Guardian Civil LT Olegario Diaz stated that the city took place in Balintawak on August 25, 1896. Historian Teodoro Agoncillo wrote in 1956 that it took place in PugadLawin in August 23, 1896, based on Pio Valenzuela's statement. Historian Teodoro Calao in his 1925 took the Filipino Revolution wrote that the event took place during the last week of August 1896 of Kangkong, Balintawak.
19th century journalists used the phrase El Grito de Rebellion or the Cry of Rebellion to describe the momentous events sweeping the Spanish colonies. In Mexico, it was the Cry of Dolores. September 16, 1810. Brazil, the city of Huaypiraga. September 7, 1822. And in the Cuba, the Cry of Matanza. February 24, 1895. In August 1896, northeast of Manila, Filipinos similarly declared their rebellion against the Spanish colonial government. It was Manuel Sastron, the Spanish historian, who institutionalized the praise for the Philippines in his 1897 book, La Insurrection en Pilipinas. All these cries were milestones in the several colonial to nationalist histories of the world.
Lalaban tayo! Oh! Punitin ang sedula! Oh!
Raging controversy. If the expression is taken literally, the cry as shouting of nationalistic slogan in mass assemblies, then there were scores of such cries. Some writers refer to Cry of Montalban on April 1895 in the Pamitinan Caves, where a group of Katipunan members wrote on the cave walls, Viva la Independencia Pilipina, long before the Katipunan decided to launch a nationwide revolution. So, noong April 10 nga, 1895, si Bonifacio and yung mga kasamahan niya na Katipuneros is nag-search ng hill sa Montalban or yung sinasabi ito ng Pamitinan Caves sa Montalban para mag-meeting. Doon, pinlano nila yung pag-start ng revolution. Doon, inulit ko, plinano pa lang. And yung sigaw na Long Live Philippines o yung mabuhay ang revolusyon is yung tanda na agree na sila na mag-start na or magla-launch na yung nationwide revolution. The historian Toro Agoncillo chose to emphasize Bonifacio's steering of settler tax receipt before a crowd of Katipuneros who then broke out into cheers. However, Guardia Civil Manuel Sitiar never mentioned in his memoir the tearing or inspection of cedula but did note the Pacto de Sangre blood pact mark on every Filipino he met in August 1896 on his reconnaissance mission around Balintawak. So, si Toro Agoncillo nga, in-emphasize niya na yung pinaka-highlight ng event is yung pagpunit ng sedula. While si Tier naman, he never mentioned in his memoir. Ano nga ba yung memoir? Ito yung mga worth remembering or mga mahalagang pangyayari. Hindi niya ni-include, hindi niya nasabi na may tearing of sedula nga. So, sino nga ba muna si Colonel Sitiar? Colonel. Si Colonel Sitiar, bago siya maging Chief of Staff ni Emilio Aguinaldo, ay naging part siya ng Royal Armed Forces of the Spain. So, yung reconnaissance mission niya nga is yung magmatsyag sa Balintawak. And, take note, siya din yung unang nakadiscover ng Katipunan na nag-i-exist pala yung mga Katipuneros. And then, nung nalaman niya yon, sinabi niya agad sa Governor General na sa Maynila na meron nga mga tao, na grupo ng mga tao na nag-sign ng documents using their own blood to join undisclosed organization. Pero yung Spanish government dinismiss yung warning ni Sitiar. Hindi sila naniwala or parang pinagsawalang bahala nila yung sinabi ni Sitiar. Malaki rin yung naging contribution ni Sitiar sa ating Philippine Revolution kasi even though na naging spy siya dun nga sa reconnaissance mission niya, doon niya natuklasan na nag-e-exist yung mga Katipunan, yung mga Katipuneros. And sinabi niya yon sa Governor General sa Maynila na hindi naman pinaniwalaan, na naging advantage naman sa mga Katipuneros kasi natuloy talaga yung plano nila. And then, naging kasapi siya. Di ba nga naging assistant chief of staff siya ni Emilio Aguinaldo. And nag-serve siya talaga sa country natin. Sinabi niya nga na, I have served the country of my father with blood. Now I will serve the country of my mother with blood. So yung mother niya is Filipino, Indio, kung tawagin noon, Indio. He started to fight for the Filipino cause. Nagsimula siyang umanib sa atin, sumapi sa mga naging part din siya ng Katipuneros noon. And some writers consider the first military engagement with the enemy as defining moment of the cry to commemorate this martial event. Upon his return from exile in Hong Kong, Emilio Aguinaldo commissioned a hymno de Balintawak to herald renewed fighting after the failed peace of the Pact of Biak na Bato. Yung ibang writers, kino-consider nila as a moment of cry, yung engagement ng first military engagement nila sa mga kalaban. And sa pagbabalik ni Emilio Aguinaldo after nung after the Pact of Biak na Bato, nag-renew siya ng revolutionary activities with the advent of Spanish and American War to form a dictatorial government. So, nung September 3, 1911, a monument of heroes of 1896 was constructed sa crossroad of Epifanio de los Santos Avenue, and sinasabi na yung Cry of Balintawak is sinaselebrate every August 26 hanggang taong 1962. Yung monument na yon was privately funded venture and kinoconsider as the first national memorial for Bonifacio and his men. The reason for 1911 monument placement is unknown. So, hindi nga malinaw kung bakit tinayo yung 1911 monument na yon. The 1911 monument could have been built to commemorate or para gunitain yung first site, but it refers to the first armed conflict which Katipuneros fought and won. And yung laban between sa Katipunan, rebels, and Spanish forces na pinapangunahan ni Lieutenant Ross ay nangyari daw sa Sitio Banlat, North Pasong Tamo Road. Malayo naman ang konti sa Balintawak ayon sa map from 1896, and the site has its own marker na madidiscuss mamaya. Meron tayong madidiscuss na PugadLawin marker. And obvious naman, and naayon sa mga eyewitnesses, ang tinutukoy nila is Balintawak. And even though na yung mga Katipunan is nagmi-meeting sa Kangkong, yung revolution daw is nagsimula na sa ibang lugar. And yung mga eyewitnesses and historian nga is nag-disagree na mali nga yung lugar, na hindi tama yung lugar and yung site ay yung date ng pinangyarihan ng first cry. But the issue did not rest there. So yung issue nga sa lugar and sa date kung kailan nagsimula yung cry of rebellion is hindi pa nagtatapos kasi base kay Pedro Gagalonia, 1970 historian, na the controversy among historians continues to the present day. So, yung Cry of PugadLawin nga is sinaselebrate sa kasalukuyan every August 23. And hindi daw yun accepted as historically accurate kasi kulang daw sa positive documentation and supporting evidence galing sa mga witnesses. And the only eyewitnesses nun is si Dr. Pio Valenzuela, and yung testimony niya lang na yun is hindi daw enough to authenticate and verify a controversial issue in history. So, pasok naman tayo sa conflicting accounts. Pio Valenzuela had several versions of the cry. Only after they are compared and reconciled with the other accounts will it be possible to determine what really happened. So, may meeting nga ba noong August 23, 1896 sa PugadLawin after nilang mag-meeting sa bahay ni Polonio Samson? And saan nga ba naganap ang pagpupunit ng sedula? Sa Kangkong nga ba or sa PugadLawin? So ngayon, talakayin natin yung different version ni Pio Valenzuela. So sinasabi ni Pio Valenzuela na yung Katipunan daw is nag-meeting every noong sa Sunday to Tuesday or August 23 to 25 sa Balintawak. And sinasabi din niya na nagsimula daw yung meeting August 22, samantalang yung Cry of Rebellion ay nangyari noong August 23 sa bahay ni Apolonio Samson sa Balintawak. And from 1928 to 1940, Valenzuela maintained that the cry happened on August 24 at the house of Tantansora. So, pinanindigan niya na nangyari nga yung Cry of Rebellion sa bahay ni Tantansora Melchora Aquino in PugadLawin, which is now situated near Pasong Tamo Road. And may mga photographs, pictures, yung of Bonifacio's widow, Gregoria de Jesus, yung asawa nga ni Bonifacio, and Katipunan members, published in La Opinion in 1928 and 1930, na may caption both times as having been taken on the site of the cry on 24 of August 1896 sa bahay ni Tandang Sora sa Pasong Tamo. So, kapansin-pansin talaga na maraming version si Pio Valenzuela ng Cry of Rebellion. So, si John and Schumacher, SJ of Ateneo de Manila University, is nag-comment sa credibility ni Pio Valenzuela. Sabi niya, I would certainly give much less credence to all accounts coming from Pio Valenzuela into the interpretation Agoncillo got from him verbally, since Valenzuela gave so much versions from the time he surrendered to the Spanish authorities and made various statements and not always compatible with another up to the time when he was an old man he was interviewed by Agoncillo. And Pio Valenzuela backtracked on yet other point. In 1896, Valenzuela testified that the Katipunan consulted Rizal on whether the time had come to revolt. Rizal was vehemently against the revolution. Later, in Agoncillo revolt of the masses, Valenzuela retracted and claimed that Rizal was actually for the uprising if certain prerequisites were met. Agoncillo reasoned that Valenzuela had lied to save Rizal. So dito, parang sinasabi ni John Schumacher, SJ of Ateneo de Manila, na hindi siya masyadong tiwala. Sabi niya, I would put much less faith in all accounts of Pio Valenzuela as well the verbal interpretation of Agoncillo that got from Valenzuela. Kasi, interview ni Agoncillo si Pio Valenzuela. Kasi nga, si Pio Valenzuela, nagbigay siya ng maraming version ng bilang eyewitness ng Cry of Rebellion. So, ayun na nga, hanggang sa sumurrender siya sa Spanish authorities, gumagawa pa rin siya ng mga various statement that was not always compatible from one another. Kumbaga, hindi magkakatugma yung mga sinasabi niya hanggang sa na-interview na nga siya ni Agoncillo. Valenzuela testified na nung kinonsulta ng mga katipunan daw si Jose Rizal na whether the time had come to revolt, sinabi daw ni Rizal na against siya sa revolution. And later, in Agoncillo Revolt of the Masses, yung sinulat niya ni Agoncillo na Revolt of the Masses, nag-retract siya doon. Kumbaga, binawi niya lahat ng mga sinabi niya and claimed that Rizal was actually for the uprising if certain prerequisites were met. So, sinabi niya na naman talaga si Rizal, sinusuportahan talaga ni Rizal yung revolution. And nagsinungaling si Pio Valenzuela para maligtas si Jose Rizal.
So, last slide na yan ang aking presentation. Sana may natutunan kayo. Any questions?
The PugadLawin marker. It was in PugadLawin where they proceeded upon leaving Samson's place in the afternoon of the 22nd, and the more than 1,000 members of the Katipunan met in the yard of Juan A. Ramos, son of Melchor Aquino, in the morning of August 23rd. Considerable discussions arose whether the revolt against the Spanish government should be started on the 29th. Only one man protested, but he was overruled in his stand. Bonifacio then announced the decision and shouted, "Brothers, it was agreed to continue with the plan of revolt. My brothers, do you swear to repudiate the government that oppresses us?" And the rebel shouting as one man replied, "Yes, sir." That being the case, Bonifacio added, "Bring out your cedulas and tear them to pieces to symbolize our determination to take arms." Amidst the ceremony, revolt's tear-stained eyes shouted, "Long live the Philippines, long live the Katipunan." Agoncillo used his considerable influence and campaigned for a change in the recognized side to PugadLawin and the date 23 August 1896. In 1963, the National Heroes Commission, or a forerunner of the NHI, without formal consultation or recommendation to President Macapagal. Consequently, Macapagal ordered that the cry of Balintawak be called the cry of PugadLawin, and that it be celebrated on 23 August instead of 26 August. The 1911 monument in Balintawak was later removed to a highway. Student groups moved to save the discarded monument, and it was installed in front of Binson's Hall in the Diliman campus of the University of the Philippines on 29 November 1968. In 1962, Teodoro Agoncillo together with the UP Student Council placed a marker at the PugadLawin site. According to Agoncillo, the house of Juan Ramos stood there in 1896, while the house of Tandang Sora was located at Pasong Tamo. Ayun, umalis sila sa PugadLawin noong August 22 ng hapon, and then noong August 23 naman ng umaga, nakita-kita yung mahigit 1,000 na miyembro ng Katipunan sa bakuran ni Juan Ramos. Malaki ang naging talakayan kung ang pag-alsa laban sa Espanyol ay dapat bang magsimula sa 29. May isang lalaking nagprotesta pero hindi niya kayang panindigan. Pagkatapos nun, inihayag na ni Bonifacio ang desisyon niya at tinanong niya ang mga kapatid o kasamahan niya kung sumusumpa ba silang itakwil ang mga gobyernong umapi sa kanila. Pumayag naman ang mga ito kaya sinabi ni Bonifacio na ilabas na ang kanilang mga sedula at pira-pirasuhin ito bilang simbolo ng kanilang determinasyong na humawak ng armas. And then, sumigaw ang mga rebelde ng may bahay ng luhan ng mabuhay ang Pilipinas, mabuhay ang Katipunan. Dahil nga sa kilala si Agoncillo sa kanila, siya ay nangampanya para daw sa pagbabago ng PugadLawin noong August 23, 1896. Noong 1963 naman, ang National Heroes Commission o ang isang tagapagpauna ng NHI ay walang formal na konsultasyon o rekomendasyon kay Pangulong Macapagal. Dahil doon, ipinag-utos si Macapagal na ang hiyaw ng Balintawak ay tatawagin sigaw ng PugadLawin at ipinagdiwang ito noong August 23 sa halip na August 26. Ang 1911 monumento naman sa Balintawak ay kinuha ng mga estudyante para ilagay sa harap ng Binson Hall sa Diliman Campus ng Universidad ng Pilipinas noong November 29, 1968. Noong 1962, si Teodoro Agoncillo at ang mga UP Student Council ay naglagay ng marker sa PugadLawin site. Ayon kay Agoncillo, ang bahay ni Juan Ramos ay nakatayo doon noong 1896, habang ang bahay on June 30, 1983, Quezon City Mayor Adelina S. Rodriguez created the PugadLawin Historical Committee to determine the location of Juan Ramos' 1896 residence at PugadLawin. Nilikha ni Quezon City Mayor Adelina S. Rodriguez ang PugadLawin Historical Committee noong June 30, 1983 upang matukoy nga nila kung saan ba talaga nakatira si Juan Ramos noong 1896 sa PugadLawin. The NHI files and the committee's findings showed the following. In August 1983, PugadLawin in Barangay Bahay, Toro was inhabited by squatter colonies. The NHI believed that it was correct in looking for the house of Juan Ramos and not of Tandang Sora. However, the former residence of Juan Ramos was clearly defined. There was an old dapdaptery at the site when the NHI conducted its survey in 1983. Teodoro Agoncillo, Gregorio Saide, and Pio Valenzuela do not mention a dapdaptery in their books. Noong August 1983, ang PugadLawin kasi sa Bahay Toro ay tinitirhan ng mga squatter colonies. And then, na-realize ng mga NHI na tama ang paghahanap sa bahay ni Juan Ramos. Pero nung magsagawa kasi ng survey ang mga NHI noong 1983, meron silang nakitang isang matandang puno ng dapdap sa lugar na yon, na hindi nabanggit sa aklat nila Teodoro Agoncillo, Gregorio Saide at Pio Valenzuela. Pio Valenzuela, the main proponent of the PugadLawin version, was dead by the time the committee conducted its research. Si Pio Valenzuela ang pangunahing tagapagtaguyod ng bersyong PugadLawin, pero wala na siya noong nagsagawa ng pananaliksik ang committee. Teodoro Agoncillo tried to locate the marker installed in August 1962 by the UP Student Council, however was no longer extant in 1983. Sinubukang hanapin ni Teodoro yung marker na inilagay ng mga UP Student Council noong 1962, pero wala siyang nakita dahil hindi na yun nag-exist noong 1983. In spite of the above findings and in the absence of any clear evidence, the NHI disregarded its own 1964 report that the Philippine Historical Committee had determined in 1940 that the PugadLawin residence was Tandang Soras and not Juan Ramos, and that the specific site of PugadLawin was in Gulod in Banlat. Dahil nga walang sapat at malinaw na ebidensya ang mga NHI, binaliwala nila ang sarili nilang ulat noong 1964 na ang Philippine Historical Committee ay nagpasya noong 1940 na ang tirahan ng PugadLawin ay kay Tandang Sora at hindi kay Juan Ramos, at ang tiyak na lugar ng PugadLawin ay ang Gulod sa Banlat. The presence of the dapdap tree in PugadLawin site determined by Agoncillo and the NHI is irrelevant, since none of the principals like Pio Valenzuela, Santiago Alvarez and others, nor historians like Saide and even Agoncillo himself before that instance mentioned such a tree. At yung pagkakaroon naman ng puno ng dapdap sa lugar ng PugadLawin na tinutukoy ng Agoncillo at ng NHI ay walang kinalaman dahil wala sa mga punong guro tulad nila Pio Valenzuela, Santiago Alvarez at iba pa, o ng mga mananalaysay tulad ni Saide at maging si Agoncillo mismo ay walang alam about dun sa dapdap tree. On the basis of 1983 committee's findings, the NHI placed a marker on August 23, 1984 on Seminary Road in Barangay Bahay, Toro behind Toro Hills High School, na Quezon City General Hospital and the San Jose Seminary. Based sa natuklasan ng committee noong 1983, ang NHI daw ay naglagay ng marker noong August 23, 1984 sa Seminary Road sa Barangay Bahay, Toro sa likod ng Toro Hill High School ng Quezon City at General Hospital at ng San Jose Seminary. Ang sigaw ng PugadLawin 1896. On this site, Andres Bonifacio and 1,000 Katipuneros met in the morning of August 23, 1896 and decided to revolt against the Spanish colonial government in the Philippines. As an affirmation of their resolve, they tore up their tax receipts which were symbols of oppression of the Filipinos. This was very first cry of the oppressed nation against Spain which was enforced with use of arms. Ayun, sabi ko rin to kanina na noong umaga nga noong August 23, 1896, nagpulong sina Andres Bonifacio at ng 1,000 Katipunero at nagpa siyang mag-alsa laban sa kolonyal ng pamahalaan ng Espanya sa Pilipinas. Bilang paninindigan ng kanilang pagpapasya, pinunit nila ang kanilang mga resibo ng buwis na mga simbolo ng pang-aapi sa mga Pilipino. Ito ang pinakaunang hiyaw ng batang inaapi laban sa Espanya na ipinatupad gamit ang mga armas. Place name PugadLawin, however, is problematic. In History of Katipunan 1939, cite the records Valenzuela's mention of the site in a footnote and not in the body of text, suggesting that the historian regarded the matter as unresolved. Masyadong problematic yung pangalan ng lugar na PugadLawin. Sa History of the Katipunan 1939, itinala ni Saide ang pagbanggit ni Valenzuela sa side ng isang footnote at sa hindi katawan ng teksto na nagmumungkahi na itinuturing na historian ang usapin bilang hindi nalutas. The PugadLawin marker.
Cartographic changes. Was there a PugadLawin in maps or literature of the period? A rough sketch or croquis de las operaciones practicadas in el Español showed the movements of Lieutenant Ross against the Katipunan on 25, 26, and 27 August 1896. The map divided each place name as Sitio Baclac, Sikbanlat. In 1897, the Spanish historian Sastron mentioned Caloocan, Balintawak, Banlat, and Pasongtamo. The names mentioned in some revolutionary sources and interpretation, the Ang Malalim, Kangkong, and PugadLawin, were not identified as barrios. Even dated Spanish and American maps mark only Caloocan and Balintawak. Ang Croquis de las Operaciones Practicadas in el Español, or sketch of the operations performed in el Español, ang nagpakita ng mga galaw ni Lieutenant Ross laban sa Katipunan noong 25, 26, and 27 August 1896. Tinukoy dun sa mapa ang bawat pangalan ng mga lugar bilang Sitio Baclac. Noong 1897, nabanggit ng isang Spanish historian na si Sastron ang Caloocan, Balintawak, Banlat at Pasongtamo. Ang mga pangalan na banggit sa ilang revolusyonaryong mapagkukunan at interpretasyon ay ang Daang Malalim, Kangkong at PugadLawin ay hindi tinukoy bilang baryo or bayan. Kahit na tingnan ang mga detalyadong mapa ng mga Spanish at American ay makikita lamang doon ay Caloocan at Balintawak. In 1943, map of Manila marks Balintawak separately from Caloocan and Diliman. The sites where revolutionary events took place are within the ambit of Balintawak. Noong 1943, nakahiwalay ang Balintawak sa Caloocan at Diliman sa mapa ng Manila. Ang mga lugar kung saan nangyari ang revolusyon ay matatagpuan sa Balintawak. Government maps issued in 1956, 1987, and 1990 confirm the existence of barangays Bahay, Toro but do not define Their boundaries, PugadLawin is not on any of these maps. Ang mga mapa na inilabas ng gobyerno noong 1956, 1987, and 1990 ay nagkumpirma ng pagkakaroon ng mga barangays Bahay, Toro. Ngunit hindi nakalagay ang mga boundaries at ang PugadLawin ay hindi kasama sa mga mapang ito. According to the government, Balintawak is no longer on the Quezon City but has been replaced by several barangays. Barrio Banlat is now divided into barangays Tandang Sora and Pasong Tamo. Only Bahay Toro remains intact. Ayon sa gobyerno, ang Balintawak ay hindi nakasakop ng Quezon City, ngunit napalitan ng mga barangays. Ang Barrio Banlat ngayon ay nahati na sa mga barangays Tandang Sora at Pasong Tamo. Ang Bahay Toro na lamang ang natira. Writer and linguist Sofranio Calderon, conducting research in the late 1920s on the toponym PugadLawin, went through the municipal records and the census of 1903 and 1918, could not find the name, and concluded that isang pagkakamali ang sabihing mayroong PugadLawin sa Caloocan. It would be a mistake to say that there is such as PugadLawin in Caloocan. Si Sofranio Calderon ay isang writer at linguist at siya rin ang nagsagawa ng pananaliksik noong huling bahagi ng 1920s sa toponym na PugadLawin. Dumaan sa mga talaan ng munisipyo at sa census noong 1903 at 1918 pero hindi mahanap ang pangalan kaya napagpasyahan na isang pagkakamali ang sabihing mayroong PugadLawin sa Caloocan. What can we conclude from all this? First, the PugadLawin was never officially recognized as a place name on any Philippine map before Second World War II. Second, PugadLawin appeared in historiography only from 1928 or some 32 years after the event took place. In turn, the revolution was always traditionally held to have occurred in the area of Balintawak, which was distinct from Caloocan and Diliman. Therefore, while the toponym PugadLawin is more romantic, it is more accurate to stick to the original cry of the Balintawak. Una na ang PugadLawin ay hindi kailanman opisyal na kinilala bilang isang pangalan ng lugar sa alinmang mapa ng Pilipinas bago ang World War II. Pangalawa, lumitaw si PugadLawin sa historiography mula 1928 o mga 32 years pagkatapos ng mga pangyayari. Ikatlo, ang revolusyon ay palaging pinaniniwalaang naganap sa Balintawak na kakaiba sa Caloocan at Diliman. Sa makatuwid, habang ang toponym na PugadLawin ay mas romantiko, mas tumpak na mananatili sa original na cry of Balintawak.
Determining the date, the official stand of NHI is that the cry took place on 23 August 1896. That the date, however, is debatable. The later accounts of Pio Valenzuela and Guillermo Mangsangkay on the turning of cedulas on 23 August are basically in agreement, but conflict with each other on the location. Valenzuela points to the house of Juan Ramos in PugadLawin, while Mangsangkay refers to Apolonio Samsons in Kangkong. Mangsangkay's final statement has more weight as it was corroborated by many eyewitnesses who are photographed in 1970, when the earliest 23 August marker was installed. Valenzuela's date 23 August and his memoirs conflict with 1928 and 1930 photographs of the surveys, with several Katipunan officers published in La Opinion which claim that the cry took place in the 24th.
Sinabi ng National Historical Institute o NHI na yung unang sigaw o cry of rebellion daw ay ginanap noong August 23, 1896, pero yung date na yon is pinagdedebatihan pa. And then, parehong date yung sinasabi sa account ni Pio Valenzuela at Masangkay, pero magkaiba yung lugar. Kay Valenzuela ay sa bahay daw ni Juan Ramos sa PugadLawin, while kay Masangkay ay sa bahay ni Apolonio Samson in Kangkong. Sinasabi din na mas lamang yung statement ni Masangkay dahil may mga picture na nakuhanan noong 1917. While kay Valenzuela, sinasabi sa kanya may more conflict na makikita sa photograph yung mga Katipunan officer which claim that the cry took place on the 24th. The turning point.
August 1896. Eyewitness accounts mention captures, escapes, recaptures, killings of Katipunan members, the interrogation of Chinese spies, the arrival of arms in Maykawayan, Bulacan, the debate with Toro, Plata, and others, the decision to go war, the shouting of slogan, tearing of cedulas, the sending of letters, presidents of Sangguniang and Barangay councils, the arrival of civil guard, the loss of Katipunan funds during the skirmish. All these events and many others constitute the beginning of nationwide revolution. The cry, however, must be defined as the turning point when the Filipinos finally rejected Spanish colonial dominion over the Philippine Islands by formally constituting their own national government and by investing a set of leaders with authority to initiate and guide the revolution towards the establishment of sovereign nation. The introduction to the original Tagalog text of the Biak na Bato Constitution states, ang paghiwalay ng Pilipinas sa kahariang Espanya sa patatag ng isang bayang may sariling pamamahala at kapangyarihan na pangangalang Republika ng Pilipinas ay siyang layong inadhika niyaring paghimagsik na kasalukuyan simula pa ng ika-24 ng Agosto ng taong 1896.
So, sa 3 slides na nabanggit, papaliwanag ko siya ngayon. Ano nga ba yung naganap noong last day of August 1896? Yung mga eyewitnesses account daw, yung mga nabanggit kanina, is yung mga nakapag-mention ng captures ng pagpatay sa Katipunan members. And tulad nga sa nabanggit, lahat yun ay nasaksihan ng mga eyewitnesses. And yung mga event daw na yun is yun yung nagsimula ng yun yung sign na pagsisimula ng nationwide revolution. And sa second slide, the cry is defined as the time kung saan yung mga Pilipino noon ay tinanggihan yung Spanish colonial dominion. So, kailan nga ba nagsimula yung Spanish colonial period? So, kung matatandaan po natin sa report ng Group 1, kung nakinig talaga tayo ng mabuti, yung paglalayag doon ni Magellan is yun yung pagsisimula ng Spanish colonial period taong 1512. And naglas yon noong 1898 Philippine Revolution. And after ruling for over 333 years, ganun sila katagal na muno dito sa Pilipinas, finally nag-let go na yung mga Spaniards. These lines in a legal document that are persuasive proof that insofar as leaders of revolutions are concerned, revolution began on August 24, 1896. The document was written only 1.5 years after the event and signed by over 50 Katipunan members, among them are Emilio Aguinaldo, Artemio Ricarte, and Valentin D. And sinasabi nga doon sa written document na binasa kanina yung Tagalog letters sa biyak na bato is kumalas na ang Pilipinas sa kaharian ng Espanya. And meron na tayong sariling pamamahala which is Republika ng Pilipinas na nagsimula noong August 24, 1896. And yung document na yon isinulat after the event, yung paghihimagsik ng mga katipunan, only 1.5 year. And nag-sign doon yung 50 katipunan members including Emilio Aguinaldo, Artemio Ricarte, and Valentin D. Emilio Aguinaldo's memoirs, Mga Gunita ng Himagsikan, 1964, refers to 2 letters from Andres Bonifacio dated 22 and 24 of August. They pinpoint the date and the place of the crucial crime meeting when the decision to attack Manila was made. So, sa memoir nga ni Emilio Aguinaldo sa Gunita ng Himagsikan, tumutukoy siya dun sa 2 letters na galing kay Bonifacio na nagpipinpoint ng lugar and date kung saan nangyari yung event na yon. And yung date, yung lugar na yon is Balintawak and PugadLawin.
On 22 August 1896, the Magdalo Council received a secret letter from Supremo Andres Bonifacio in Balintawak, which stated that the Katipunan will hold an important meeting on the 24th of the said month, and that it was extremely necessary to send 2 representatives or delegates in the name of the said council. The meeting would be timed to coincide with the feast day of Saint Bartolome in Malabon, Tambobong. Upon receiving the said invitation, our President, Mr. Baldomero Aguinaldo, called a meeting at Tribunal of Cavite El Viejo. We were apprehensive about sending representatives because the areas they would have passed through were dangerous, and was a fact that the civil guard and veterans were arresting travelers, especially those suspected of being Freemasons and members of Katipunan. Nevertheless, we agreed and nominated to send a single representative in the person of our brave brother, Mr. Domingo Orculo. Our representative arrived safely at his destination and also returned unharmed, bearing a letter from the Supremo dated 24 August. It contained no orders but the shocking many of his comrades had been captured and killed by the civil guards and veterans in Gulod.
So, sinasabi nga noong August 22, 1896 is naka-receive ng letter yung Magdalo Council galing kay Supremo Andres Bonifacio. Yung letter is nagmula sa Balintawak, which stated that the Katipunan will hold a meeting on August 24. And kailangan na merong representative sa ang Magdalo Council. And nasaktuhan naman yung meeting na feast day of Saint Bartolome sa Malabon, and after ma-receive ng President Mr. Baldomero Aguinaldo, nagpatawag agad siya ng meeting sa Tribunal of Cavite. And sinabi niya na magpapadala daw siya ng representative sa katauhan ni Mr. Domingo Orculo. So, nung panahon na yon, sobrang hirap talaga mag-travel. Mantakin nyo, Cavite to Balintawak, Caloocan. Napakahirap na talagang mag-travel kasi ang dami nga mga Guardia Civil, yung mga spy na sinasabi. Sila yung mga nagmamatsyag sa paligid and hinuhuli nila yung malalaman nilang Mason and part ng Katipunan. Pero yung representative na si Mr. Orculo is nakarating naman ng ligtas sa Balintawak at nakauwi siya sa Cavite ng ligtas. Nadala-dala yung sulat galing kay Supremo na may date na August 24. So, yung first monument to mark the cry was erected in 1903 on Elias Street in Tondo, Manila. And sa tapat yun ng Bahay kung saan ginanap yung Liga announcement ng mga Katipunan na aatakihin nila yung Manila Saturday night, August 29. And yung signal nila sa pag-atake is yung pag-alis ng ilaw sa luneta. And sinasabi din na unacceptable pa rin yung official stand of the turning point of revolution, which is the tearing of sedula in the cry of PugadLawin on August 1896 sa bahay ni Juan Ramos, PugadLawin, Bahay, Toro.
The events of the 17th and 26 August 1896, record of closure the Balintawak, that to the Kalabokan international people the rebuilding to the cry in Balintawak, sign that foreign washing better. I know the report point the violent and in case in PugadLawin his not is historical repeal the variable in outside of to the statement beyond the Bay, Valenzuela 1913. After in the Philippine historical connection around the table, the discussion, the February his year in granddaughter and tending Sora, the prosted in using the Torpin in PugadLawin, which inside repeating wax and rest on the top for the sampalok the throw in golden heightness in rotated area near Balintawak his reclining nayness and NH repayments the PugadLawin his seminar route in Project 8. What is shoulding celebrate in this sustainablement of revolution and or the Pakistan government that republication was Republican explication of the screen nation of Bonifacio has the Kasang Pangulo, Superman President of application members in can the payment of minister. Yun sa ganyan. Tandang Sora, winner the thousand magkad institution including Valorant and Balin under destination and ratificating in August 1986. Caloocan Tabok in place in rounding on Monday 24. What is clear in the calling the PugadLawin. Lawin is 23 his information and toward the section and country. In this poll available members in the historical facts and secondary the crying the Balintawak August 1996 tasting of burnt house in Tandang Sora gold and the barangay Balin Lucian and City found and when the Filipino will stay of the boy. In 7 events in August 1896, court in Closen, Balintawak in Caloocan International People Report.
So, sinasabi nga na yung event happened August 17 to 26 is malapit sa Balintawak, Caloocan. So, yung mga tao is tinutukoy na nila as cry of Balintawak since malapit nga ito sa reference point. And sabi na, in any case, PugadLawin is not verifiable sa mga statement ni Pio Valenzuela. And a great daughter of Tandang Sora protested to use the toponym or name of the place, yung PugadLawin, kasi tumutukoy daw yon sa hawk nest sa top ng sampalok tree sa Gulod, malapit sa Balintawak. And another is, we should celebrate is the establishment of revolutionary or facto government that was Republican in aspiration, and yung designation of Bonifacio bilang Supreme President, election of the members of his cabinet ministers, and sanggunian in Balangay heads which authorized these moves na nangyaring sa kay Tandang Sora's house near Pasong Tamo Road sa Sitio Gulod, Barrio Banlat, under the jurisdiction of Municipality Caloocan, Monday ng hapon, August 24, 1896. So, hindi nga malinaw kung bakit tinawag na Cry of PugadLawin and may date na August 23. Incorrect lang naman yung mga interpretation na noon. And contrary siya to indisputable and numerous facts. Opposite siya sa historical facts. And the centennial of the Cry of Balintawak should be celebrated on August 24, 1986. So, dapat talaga sinaselebrate yung Cry of Balintawak August 24, 1896 na nangyari nga sa bahay ni Tandang Sora in Gulod, now Barangay Banlat, Quezon City. Yun is yung kailan and saan nangyari yung Philippine Nation. So, ano nga ba yung halaga noong petsa at lugar? At epekto nito sa ating mga Pilipino. So, para sa akin, wala namang halaga kung sa PugadLawin or sa Balintawak. Ang mahalaga is yung ginawa ni Andres Bonifacio and Katipunan para sa bansa. Binago nila yung takbo ng kasaysayan ng bansa, and yun yung pinakamahalaga. Mapabalintawak or PugadLawin, mas mahalaga yung detalye kung ano yung ambag nila sa kasaysayan at sa bansa. And napakahalaga ng unang sigaw o Cry of Balintawak sa history kasi ito yung nagpapakita ng pagmamahal ng mga Pilipino sa sariling bansa. Finally, over 333 years na pamumuno ng mga banyaga is lumaya na tayo sa kanila.
So, last slide na po yun. Any questions? Thank you po for listening.